So, if you're a bit of a political geek like me, you might have been watching the One Nation victory in Farah and thinking, holy shit, what does this mean for Australia? And look, it's an interesting question. Hi, I'm Claire Heath-McIvor. I talk about cults, politics, Christian nationalism, and toxic evangelicalism. Look, the Venn diagrams don't always overlap, but sometimes they do. This is one of the situations in which it doesn't really a lot. So we know that One Nation is far-right conservative populist party. They run on an engine of grievance, which is really interesting because I've got like 12 of the things that Pauline Hanson's voted against up here, and it's really interesting. While she talks about everyday Australians, she also votes against their interest. Things like she has almost always voted against increasing housing affordability, making TAFE education fee-free, voted consistently against a royal commission into robo-debt, which killed people, by the way, it killed people, voted consistently against closing the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, voted consistently against decreasing the gender pay gap, subsidised childcare, government support for childcare, voted consistently against targeting homelessness in specific vulnerable groups. I mean, this is not voting for the rights of people who need protection against the big billionaire class or big government. It's not that. She actually doesn't vote in line with her talking points. But on top of this, we need to understand that the temptation to, and I do this myself, I do because I get frustrated and sometimes I hate the world. I get snide and sardonic when it comes to One Nation voters, and I say mocky things, but it's not helpful because populism is grievance politics, and grievance politics runs on the engine of discontent. But this is often grounded in reality. Things like wage stagnation, economic insecurity, cost of living, inflation, distrust of institutions, including the public service, including government, including corruption in government. There's all of these things that sit underneath this and drive legitimate discontent, and we can't win the battle against populism if we're thinking in increasingly polarized ways, if it's an us versus them. And this is what really shits me about what the major parties are doing right now. And let's keep in mind, I'm politically homeless, largely. They're not addressing the grievances. And you can't get political populism to go away, grievance politics to go away, if you're not listening to the grievances. This is the very thing that has allowed grievance politics to spring up. Of course, critics of this theory of politics claim that populism also thrives in places that are relatively prosperous. I'd counter that is just people taking advantage of grievance politics in order to get their positions in Parliament and those nice cushy wages and $2 million jets, but that's another story. The first thing that I wish the major parties would do is address the grievance. Address the fears, speak about them, speak to them, take them seriously. It's frustrating. It's frustrating watching this all happen, especially when, as a comms person, I'm going, bloody hell, just actually address the problem. Acknowledge it as a problem for some people, and then speak about it. Engage people in the solutions. And by the by, that's another thing that we need to do in order to fight back about populism, is engage people in the democratic process, engage them in finding solutions, because the thing that we have at the moment is we have, over in the Liberals, a very coordinated right-wing infiltration that's been happening for years now, and that's been well documented. And it's now resulted in a party that has made itself quite determinedly unelectable because of this confected outrage, I think, this populist creep within even that party. Of course, this is all based on my opinion and my experience within one of the groups that infiltrated them. That's a story that you can find on 60 Minutes on the ABC and in various different other publications if you Google my name. But in amongst these things, like actually addressing the problem, actually engaging people in the democratic process, we also need to do things like rebuild the information environment. Conspiracy theory is thriving on social media at the moment. The amount of memes that are flying around and all of that sort of thing are really taking some of this into the area of conspiracy theory. And by the way, in my work as a cult advocate, anti-cult advocate, we see that there's this overlap between people who believe in conspiracy theory and people who can be sucked into a cult. Mind you, anyone can be sucked into a cult if the cult is clever enough, and they are. But, it matters. It matters when people, kind of float off into fringe beliefs. And a lot of this can be driven by the way that social media trots out cheap and unfactual but very, very effective information. It's like a contagion. And the other thing is that we need to not ignore the problem but not mimic it either. We need to find a more sensible way through. And we have to accept that populism is a symptom. It's not just a disease. So we need to actually look at what is the root of this contagion. What is there? We need to talk about these things. If it's identity loss, if it's economic insecurity, if it's a feeling like society is moving on and there's not a place for you anymore, then that's an issue. And that's an issue that we need to be addressing in public policy. And I don't know, there's lots of thoughts that I have on this, but I just don't think that solving the one nation problem, and it is a problem because they're racist as hell, and there's just so many problems. And if you don't think that Pauline Hanson is going to get rolled by the absolutely giant male egos in that crew, you've got another thing coming. Also, in conservative circles, and Christian circles especially, I often joke that everyone wants to be Jesus and no one wants to be the 12 disciples. So usually the right wing sort of starts to eat itself alive after a while. So I don't know, I give it 6 months. It should be interesting to see whether this One Nation surge actually lasts through to the next election. Probably will. But if we look closely, I think we'll start to see the cracks already. So anyway, thoughts. The Royal Commission into the Bondi tragedy has just begun. And again, what I think in all of this is we have to approach with compassion and empathy, and we have to approach this with understanding the drivers. And the drivers is often grievance, it's often identity loss, it's often like legitimate things that have driven people to find an illegitimate solution. I know, I get it, it's so frustrating right now. You can kind of be shaking your head going, well, can't you see what's true? And it can be tempting. I'm always telling my kids that just because the other kid hit them doesn't mean it gives them a right to hit them back. Somebody has to break the cycle. Are we going to break the cycle? Are we going to be the ones that, go high? Are we going to be the ones that stop slinging mud at the other side and start to engage in a dignified, deep conversation about what solutions are? Probably not. But at least right now on this Monday morning, I'm thinking about things in a more circumspect way than my natural temptation to just mock One Nation voters. Give me this one moment of dignity.